On February 6, 1958, the world of soccer mourned as a plane carrying the Manchester United team crashed during takeoff in Munich. It was one of the darkest days in sports history, but nearly 6 decades later, another team, one filled with dreams, underdog glory, and a city's undying hope, would suffer a fate even more heartbreaking. They were called Chapecoense, a small Brazilian football club that had risen from obscurity to the brink of international greatness. But as they flew to Colombia for the biggest match in their history, destiny had other plans. November 28, 2016, a chartered flight, LaMia Flight 2933, was en route from Santa Cruz, Bolivia, to Medellín, Colombia. On board were 77 people. This included 68 passengers, players, coaches, journalists, and staff of Asociación Chapecoense de Futebol, and 9 crew members. The team was about to compete in the finals of the Copa Sudamericana, South America's version of the Europa League, against Atlético Nacional, a Colombian powerhouse. This was Chapecoense's biggest moment, from a tiny town in Brazil to continental glory. But none of them would make it to the stadium. To understand the weight of the tragedy, we first need to know who Chapecoense were. Based in Chapecó, a small city in southern Brazil with around 200,000 residents, Chapecoense was not a traditional football giant. In fact, they were mostly unknown outside of Brazil. In 2009, they were in the 4th division of Brazilian football. By 2014, just 5 years later, they had fought their way up to the top-tier Serie A. Their ascent was nothing short of miraculous. Think of it like a high school team in Ohio climbing all the way to the Super Bowl in under a decade. Their budget was small. Their stadium held only 20,000 people, but they had heart and grit and a dream. They played with passion and became the Cinderella story of South American football. Their journey to the Copa Sudamericana finals was equally breathtaking. They beat top teams from Argentina, Colombia, and Paraguay, shocking the continent. The first leg of the final was scheduled to be held in Medellín. Because of financial constraints and logistics, the club chartered a flight with a Bolivian airline, LaMia. On board were 22 players, 23 journalists, and various staff members. LaMia Flight 2933 took off from Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Its final stretch before reaching Medellín. It never arrived. Just minutes before landing, the plane crashed into the mountains near the town of La Unión. The pilots had reported an emergency citing electrical failure. But what investigators would later find was more chilling. There was no mechanical failure. The plane simply ran out of fuel. You heard that right. A plane carrying 77 people, including an entire football team, crashed because it ran out of fuel. Regulations require that commercial flights carry enough fuel for the trip, plus reserves for diversions or emergencies. LaMia's flight plan had no such buffer. The aircraft was flying at its maximum range, with no room for error. Due to air traffic delays and a holding pattern near the airport, the plane didn't have enough fuel to make it. When it finally lost power, the plane was just 10 miles from the runway. It clipped trees and slammed into the mountainside. 71 people died. Only 6 survived. 3 of them, players. The football world was stunned. Atlético Nacional, the team Chapecoense was supposed to face, requested that the Brazilian club be awarded the title, in a beautiful gesture of sportsmanship and solidarity. FIFA and CONMEBOL agreed. Chapecoense were crowned champions of the Copa Sudamericana, posthumously. Around the world, stadiums held moments of silence. In Brazil, millions mourned. In Colombia, thousands gathered in pouring rain at the stadium where the final was meant to be played, to honor the team that never arrived. The crash wasn't just a sports tragedy. It was a human one. Fathers, sons, brothers, dreams, all gone in a moment that never should have happened. There were only 6 survivors. Among them, Alan Rochelle, a defender, Yaxin Fulman, the backup goalkeeper, who had to have his leg amputated, and Neto, another defender. Rochelle later returned to the field, wearing the captain's armband in a friendly match against Barcelona, a symbol of resilience. These survivors became living reminders of what was lost and what endured. The club vowed to rebuild. With support from teams across Brazil and the world, Chapecoense was slowly pieced back together. Loaned players, financial aid, and sheer determination helped them field a new team within months. But it would never be the same. The real shock came with the investigation. LaMia Airlines was found to be grossly negligent. They had ignored international safety protocols. The pilot, Miguel Quiroga, who died in the crash, was also one of the airline's owners. He approved the flight plan, knowing it was dangerously close to fuel limits. The airline had previously faced warnings, but nothing was done. And when the plane began losing power, instead of declaring a fuel emergency early, which would have given them landing priority, the crew waited too long. By the time they called for help, it was too late. Imagine knowing your fuel gauge is on empty and the runway is in sight, but you can't quite make it. That's exactly what happened. The pilot's final words were filled with desperation and silence. Among the dead were 19 one-inch journalists, many of them top sports broadcasters in Brazil. They had covered Chapecoense's rise from the beginning. Some of them were traveling with the team not just as media, but as friends. One photo went viral. It showed journalist Rafael Hensel on the plane, smiling. He was one of the survivors. He later returned to work, broadcasting a Chapecoense match, but tragically died of a heart attack in 2019. This tragedy wasn't just a sports page headline. It was a national wound, one felt in stadiums, living rooms, and press booths. Chapeco is not a big city, but in the days after the crash, it became the heart of Brazil. The team's stadium turned into a memorial. Coffins wrapped in green and white flags lined the field as tens of thousands filed in to say goodbye. It was more than just mourning. It was a collective embrace, a declaration that their story wouldn't end on a mountainside. Local children wore Chapecoense jerseys with names of fallen players on their backs. Murals were painted, songs were written, and slowly, painfully, the club began to play again. You might think that after such a devastating crash, aviation authorities and the football world would ensure such negligence never happens again. But sadly, aviation corners are still sometimes cut. Chapecoense's crash is now studied in aviation schools as a case of what happens when cost-cutting, overconfidence, and failure to follow protocol intersect. Just like the tragic 2018 crash involving the Leicester City Football Club owner's helicopter, sports and aviation remain entwined in moments of both triumph and tragedy. Chapecoense's story is now part of a long and painful chapter, a reminder that the price of ignoring safety can be measured not just in money, but in lives. Today, Chapecoense continues to play football. They've been relegated and promoted again, but they are no longer just a team. They are a symbol of hope, of endurance, of rising from ashes. Their story inspired documentaries, books, and films, including Netflix's Nossa Chape. And in Medellín, a memorial stands on the mountainside near the crash site, where locals still bring flowers. Chapecoense may not win trophies like Real Madrid or Manchester United, but they've won something deeper, a place in the hearts of millions. Sometimes the most powerful stories in sports aren't about who lifted the trophy, but who never got the chance. Chapecoense's story isn't just about football. It's about dreams interrupted and the strength to dream again.